Welcome to the Real News Network. Today we talk to Victor Navasky, a legendary name in liberal, progressive publishing and newspapers. He was the editor and publisher of Nation magazine. He's now the emeritus editor, publisher, emeritus publisher?
Publisher emeritus.
Right. Publisher emeritus. He also is a professor at Columbia School of Journalism and chair of the Columbia Journalism Review. And he's also the author. His most recent book is Mission Accomplished, or How We Won the War in Iraq, and President Bush on the cover. And as everyone knows, the war in Iraq is over and President Bush was the winner. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
We're talking now, President Bush is gone. He waved goodbye. He got on the helicopter.
Yes.
He seems to have escaped prosecution, and we will get into that a little bit more in the interview.
Okay.
But you wrote a blog recently on the Nation website, which talked about the debate that's going on in the liberal and progressive circles across the country, which more or less is who is the real Barack Obama. And you said that, used the phrase that you think that Obama is, if I'm quoting you correctly, a liberal wolf in centrist clothing, and that essentially what Obama's doing is redefining what the center is. So explain what you mean by this.
Okay. So first, I had just come back from the inauguration, and people were awash in this sea of happiness. When I say people, I mean people in the state. I don't mean liberals particularly. People in the station, people on the line waiting for taxis, people in restaurants, people watching the thing on television. And the first thing that happened the next morning, I turn on the channel 14 in New York, which is one of the NBC cable channels, and MSNBC, and there is Morning Joe. Morning Joe is not a liberal. Joe Scarborough is a former center-right guy. Pat Buchanan, who's a far-right guy, and another guy who is a centrist, not particularly liberal. And all of them are praising Obama's speech as a centrist speech, and praising his cabinet because they're center picks, and praising his reaching out to his opponent McCain in the election and whoever else he reached out to as a centrist. And I sit there and I think, okay, first of all, the question you asked, what is the center anyway? And that depends where the right is and where the left is. I think the country for the last 25 years has been moving way over to the right, and I think it has, with Obama's election, started to move back a little bit. So the center is still sort of center-right, but it's shifting. It's not stationary, and everything the President of the United States does helps define where it is, because where he is, more or less, is in the center, and then the government tilts depending on who's on which side or what side. But I also look at his positions in the campaign. I look at his voting record. People who chart these things claim he has the most liberal voting record in Congress. I listened to his inaugural speech, which I was not particularly thrilled by.
Why?
I mean, it wasn't lofty and inspiring the way even JFK's speech was, and JFK was a Cold Warrior, which I am not, and Obama, one hopes, is not, and yet the content of that speech was, to me, not a centrist speech in the American political context the way it is now. Now, one of the we have two big issues facing the United States and the world community. One is what's going to happen internationally. The Iraq War is the hangover from it, but what's going to happen in Afghanistan, what's going to happen in the world community, and the relationship between militarism and the possibility of peace. And then we have the world economy and how it relates domestically. In terms of the economy, it seems to me that Keynes has been rediscovered. And this is, whether one is for an $800 billion bailout or whatever, this is not a centrist, whatever one means by center, this is not a centrist proposition.
Why?
Because
isn't it in the centrism devil in the detail? Like there's stimulus and then stimulus for who? So
of course it is. Let me say, I don't believe the $800 billion is enough to get us off the economic center. I think Joe Stiglitz has a way of analyzing where we are, and Bill Greider, who writes in The Nation, has a way of analyzing where we are, which suggests that what is required is a lot more money and not just a one-time injection of cash, number one. Number two, what's required is nationalization of the banks. And number three, what's required is some kind of shift in the global economy, and the United States can have a role in playing that, but it's highly complicated. And I don't have any illusions that the Obama administration is going to do the necessary things in each of those areas to solve this problem and take care of poor people at home, not to mention around the world, and on the one hand. On the other hand, there was a great civil rights lawyer from the South who died recently, and he was in Alabama. He left it out of protest in the 60s, and I was interviewing him during the Kennedy years, and he said to me, well, what you're asking me reminds me of two farmers are walking down the road, and one says to the other, how's your wife? And the other says, compared to whose? Well, compared to George Bush, the guy is not in the center to me. Compared to Bill Clinton, who said the era of big government is over, Obama literally said in his speech, it's not a question of big or small, it's a question of what's right or wrong. I took the line I cite to me, helping to move the center over, is a line that was just a throwaway word in there when he said that our government is supposed to be on behalf of Christians, Jews, and then he threw in Islam, which the president has never said before, and non-believers. Well, once he put in non-believers, to me, the center moved a little bit over to the liberal left. That's all. Nothing big, no big deal, but symbolically, that's what I thought.
In the next segment of our interview, let's talk a little bit more about what is possible at this time, because I think the issue of assessing where the center is and where Obama is partly compared to who,
sure,
but also an assessment of this moment of time, which is dramatically different than we've been in the past. So I guess the real question is, what's possible for a new kind of center or center-left? So please join us for the next segment of our interview with Victor Navasky.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.